The tension in the makeshift ring was electric as Mike Tyson, at the peak of his arrogance in 1988, stood across from Muhammad Ali, who at 46 was supposed to be well past his prime. What started as a friendly exhibition had turned into something much more serious when Tyson, flush with his recent victories and convinced of his own invincibility, made the catastrophic decision to mock Ali's fighting style and challenge him to a real fight using karate rules. The crowd of invited guests at Don King's private estate had no idea they were about to witness one of the most shocking moments in boxing history. A lesson in humility that would be delivered with the precision of a master craftsman. If you're already feeling the electricity of this impossible matchup, drop it in the comments so I know you're following this legendary encounter. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because what happens in the next 3 minutes will shatter everything you think you know about fighting, respect, and the difference between raw power and refined skill. This isn't just another boxing story. This is about what happens when arrogance meets artistry. The setup for this legendary confrontation began 3 weeks earlier at a charity gala in Las Vegas. Tyson, riding high on his recent destruction of Michael Spinks in 91 seconds, was holding court with reporters and celebrities, his confidence bordering on delusion. At just 22 years old, he truly believed he was untouchable, that his ferocious power and intimidating presence made him superior to every fighter who had come before him. Ali was overrated, Tyson had declared to a stunned audience that included several boxing legends. All that dancing around, all that talking, that's not real fighting. Real fighting is what I do. I would have destroyed Ali in his prime, and I could still destroy him now, even though he's old. All that fancy footwork is just show. When you have real power like me, you don't need to dance. The room had gone silent. Muhammad Ali, who was present at the gala as an honored guest, had listened to Tyson's words with the patient expression of a man who had heard such boasts countless times before. But when Tyson continued his tirade, suggesting that Ali's style was weak and that he could prove it by beating Ali, even if Ali was allowed to use karate or whatever fancy moves he wanted, something shifted in the atmosphere. Ali, despite his Parkinson's affecting his speech, had stood up slowly and walked over to where Tyson sat. The younger fighter, expecting submission or perhaps an argument, was surprised when Ali simply smiled and whispered something in his ear that made Tyson's face change from smug confidence to something approaching uncertainty. "Young man," Ali had said, his voice quiet but clear enough for those nearby to hear, "there's a difference between being strong and being a fighter. You're strong, no doubt, but fighting is an art, and art takes time to learn. If you really believe what you're saying, then let's settle this properly." Don King, ever the promoter, had seized on the moment immediately. Within hours, he had arranged for a private exhibition at his estate, complete with a regulation ring and a small audience of boxing insiders, celebrities, and media members sworn to secrecy. The rules were unusual: 3 rounds, with Tyson allowed to use only boxing, while Ali could incorporate any martial arts techniques he chose. Tyson had agreed immediately, his ego preventing him from seeing the trap he was walking into. He spent the next 3 weeks training harder than ever, convinced that his youth and power would easily overcome whatever tricks the aging Ali might try. His trainers, Cus D'Amato having passed away, tried to warn him about underestimating Ali, but Tyson's arrogance had reached such heights that he dismissed their concerns. Ali, meanwhile, had quietly begun working with a team that included not just his longtime trainer Angelo Dundee, but also masters of various martial arts disciplines. Few people knew that Ali had studied karate and other fighting forms throughout his career, viewing them as ways to improve his already legendary footwork and timing. At 46, his body might have been slower, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. The night of the exhibition, the atmosphere at Don King's estate was unlike anything the invited guests had ever experienced. The ring was set up on the mansion's back lawn, surrounded by torches that cast dancing shadows across the faces of the 40-odd spectators. Among them were boxing legends like Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran, actors like Sylvester Stallone and Robert De Niro, and journalists who understood they might be witnessing history. Tyson entered the ring first, his usual intimidating scowl in place, shadow boxing with the vicious intensity that had terrified opponents for years. He looked every inch the destroyer he believed himself to be, muscles rippling, eyes cold, radiating the kind of menace that had made him the youngest heavyweight champion in history. Then Ali made his entrance, and everything changed. Despite his age and the visible effects of Parkinson's, there was something in his movement that reminded everyone present why he had been called the greatest. He moved with a fluid grace that seemed to defy his condition, and when he looked across the ring at Tyson, there was no fear, no uncertainty, only the calm confidence of a master about to give a lesson. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Don King with his characteristic flair, "tonight we witness something unprecedented. In this corner, the current undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, Iron Mike Tyson. And in this corner, the three-time heavyweight champion, the man who called himself the greatest, Muhammad Ali. Special rules tonight. Tyson fights boxing only. Ali may use any techniques he chooses, 3 rounds or until one fighter cannot continue." The bell rang, and Tyson immediately charged forward with the bull-like aggression that had served him so well. His plan was simple: overwhelm Ali with power before the older man could implement whatever strategy he had planned. Tyson threw a devastating left hook that would have knocked out most heavyweights, but Ali wasn't there. What happened next defied everything the spectators thought they knew about fighting. Ali didn't just slip the punch, he seemed to flow around it like water around a stone. His movement incorporated elements of traditional boxing footwork, but also the circular patterns of kung fu and the angular shifts of karate. Tyson, expecting to connect with devastating force, found himself punching air, while Ali materialized behind him. Do you think Tyson's raw power could overcome Ali's experience and technique, or was this mismatch over before it began? Comment power or technique based on what your gut tells you. Before Tyson could turn around, Ali struck. But it wasn't a traditional boxing punch. It was a perfectly executed karate technique, a ridge hand strike to a pressure point on Tyson's neck that temporarily disrupted his balance and coordination. Tyson staggered, more from surprise than damage, but Ali was already moving again. "You see, Mike," Ali said as he glided around the confused younger fighter, his voice carrying clearly in the night air, "power without precision is just noise. You hit hard, but you hit where your opponent used to be, not where they are." Tyson, frustrated and embarrassed, launched into a furious combination of punches, each one thrown with knockout intention. But Ali had entered what could only be described as a different dimension of fighting. He incorporated techniques from multiple martial arts, the evasive movements of boxing, the circular footwork of kung fu, the precise strikes of karate, and the flowing transitions of aikido. Every punch Tyson threw was either avoided completely or redirected harmlessly away. Ali's counters were surgical, not designed to cause maximum damage, but to demonstrate complete control. A finger strike to a nerve cluster that made Tyson's left arm go temporarily numb. A foot sweep that sent the younger fighter stumbling. A palm strike to the solar plexus that left Tyson gasping for air. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the most feared fighter in the world was systematically dismantled by a man old enough to be his father. Tyson's legendary intimidation factor meant nothing against an opponent who had faced down Sonny Liston, Joe Frazier, and George Foreman in their primes. Ali had learned long ago that the most dangerous opponents weren't necessarily the strongest. They were the smartest. The problem with young fighters today, Ali continued his commentary while effortlessly avoiding another wild swing, is they think fighting is about anger. Real fighting is about control. Control of distance, control of timing, control of yourself. Tyson was becoming increasingly desperate. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. Every opponent he had faced had either been intimidated into submission or overwhelmed by his power. But Ali was treating him like a student in need of education, and the lesson was becoming increasingly humiliating. The end came with shocking suddenness. Tyson, in his frustration, dropped his guard for just a fraction of a second while winding up for what he intended to be a fight-ending uppercut. Ali, who had been waiting for exactly this moment, stepped inside Tyson's reach and delivered a technique that was part boxing, part karate, part pure artistry. It was a short, sharp strike to Tyson's temple, not thrown with the intention to cause serious injury, but placed with such precision that it temporarily disrupted the younger fighter's equilibrium. Tyson's eyes rolled back, his knees buckled, and he collapsed to the canvas like a felled tree. The silence that followed was deafening. Mike Tyson, the man who had never been knocked down in his professional career, lay unconscious on the canvas, while Muhammad Ali stood over him, not in triumph, but with the sad expression of a teacher who had been forced to deliver a harsh lesson. The count was academic. Tyson didn't stir until the count of 8, and when he did regain consciousness, he was clearly in no condition to continue. The fight was over in 2 minutes and 37 seconds of the first round, not because Ali had overpowered Tyson, but because he had outclassed him so completely that the outcome had been inevitable from the opening bell. As Tyson sat on his stool, still dazed and trying to understand what had happened, Ali knelt beside him. "Son," he said gently, "you have all the tools to be great, but tools without wisdom are just weapons. And weapons without purpose hurt the person holding them more than anyone else." The aftermath of that night was kept largely secret, as agreed upon by all present, but those who witnessed it said it changed Tyson profoundly. The arrogance that had defined his public persona was replaced by a new humility, a recognition that there were levels to the fighting game that he had never even imagined. Ali, for his part, never spoke publicly about the exhibition. When asked about it years later, he would simply smile and say, "Every fighter needs to learn that being the strongest doesn't make you the best. Sometimes the best lesson is the hardest one to swallow." The few journalists present wrote about the event in coded terms, describing it as a private training session or a friendly sparring match. But word spread through the boxing community like wildfire. The story became legend. The night Muhammad Ali, at 46 and battling Parkinson's, reminded the world why he had been called the greatest. Tyson's career continued, but those close to him noticed changes. He began studying tapes of Ali's fights with new intensity, not just watching for techniques, but trying to understand the mental game that had made Ali so dominant. He started incorporating elements of other martial arts into his training, seeking to develop the kind of complete fighting system that Ali had demonstrated that night. "I learned that night that I wasn't a complete fighter," Tyson would later admit in private conversations. "I was just a puncher who happened to be very good at punching. Ali showed me what it meant to be an artist in the ring, and I realized I had been painting with only one color." And the exhibition also had a profound impact on the other spectators. Many of them were successful people who had achieved greatness in their own fields. But watching Ali dismantle Tyson with such effortless precision reminded them that true mastery transcends any single discipline. It was a demonstration of what happens when natural talent is combined with decades of study, practice, and philosophical understanding. Sugar Ray Leonard, who was ringside that night, later said it was the most educational 3 minutes of boxing he had ever witnessed. "Ali didn't just beat Tyson," Leonard explained. He gave a masterclass in the difference between fighting and combat. Tyson was fighting, throwing punches, trying to hurt his opponent. Ali was engaged in combat, controlling space, time, and his opponent's mind. The techniques Ali used that night became the subject of intense study among martial artists and boxing trainers. Video of the exhibition, shot by Don King's personal cameraman, was reportedly studied frame by fighting experts trying to understand exactly how Ali had achieved such complete dominance. What they found was a perfect synthesis of Western boxing and Eastern martial arts, combined with Ali's natural gifts and refined through decades of experience at the highest level. Ali had essentially created his own fighting system, one that incorporated the best elements of multiple disciplines while remaining true to his core boxing foundation. The psychological aspect of the victory was perhaps even more impressive than the physical techniques. Ali had gotten inside Tyson's head before the fight even began, using the younger fighter's arrogance against him. By allowing Tyson to believe he could win easily, Ali had set him up for a fall that was as much mental as physical. The fight was won before we even got in the ring, one observer noted. Ali knew exactly what Tyson would do because Tyson's ego wouldn't let him do anything else. It was like watching a chess master play against someone who only knew how to move the pieces. Years later, when Tyson faced his own struggles and setbacks, he would often reflect on that night at Don King's estate. The lesson Ali had taught him, that true strength comes from understanding, not just power, became a guiding principle in his efforts to rebuild his life and career. The exhibition also served as Ali's final statement as a fighter. Though he never fought professionally again, that night proved that his greatness transcended age, physical condition, and conventional limitations. He had shown that a true master never really retires. They simply choose when to demonstrate their mastery. For the 40-odd people who witnessed it, the exhibition became a defining moment in their understanding of what greatness really means. They had seen raw talent humbled by refined skill, arrogance defeated by wisdom, and youth schooled by experience in the most definitive way possible. The story of that night continues to circulate in boxing circles, growing in legend with each telling. Some details may have been embellished over the years, but the core truth remains. Muhammad Ali, at an age when most fighters are long retired and while battling a degenerative disease, reminded the world why he had been called the greatest, by delivering a lesson in humility to the most feared fighter of his generation. It was a reminder that in fighting, as in life, there are levels to greatness that can only be achieved through years of dedication, study, and the wisdom that comes from understanding that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the knowledge of when and how to use one's power. Have you ever witnessed a moment when experience and wisdom triumphed over raw talent and arrogance? Or perhaps you've had your own humbling experience that taught you the difference between being strong and being truly skilled? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from moments when we realize how much we still have to learn. This story is a work of fiction inspired by the legendary careers of both Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson, and the timeless truth that true mastery combines physical skill with mental discipline and wisdom.